Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nate Crespo, your host for today and forever, and welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast, where it is my job to focus on the unique journeys to the law and law school of professionals in the legal field and law students. But let's talk about what we're doing today, because today we have another incredible guest. He is a William and Mary Law School graduate and currently works as a partner at BenGlassLaw and as the president of Great Legal Marketing. He's held past positions as a trial lawyer at Marks & Glass and as a trial lawyer at the Law Office of David Marks. Finally, he's the host of the Life Beyond Briefs podcast. Excited to have him on the podcast today, Mr. Brian Glass. Before getting into the episode today, a few minutes of ads now. For no ads in the middle, no ads at the end. To support this podcast, please be sure to check out all the sponsors below: Start LSAT, Rhetoric, and LisaBlaster.com. If these sponsors bring great interest to you, please check out the sponsor links below in the description. I love them, and I hope you love them as much as I do. And of course, be sure to check us out at lawyersinthemaking.substack.com. One word, lawyersinthemaking.substack.com. Start LSAT, started by former guest Alden Spratt, 21-year-old superstar and now an official sponsor of the Lawyers in the Making podcast. Start LSAT was built on breaking down barriers, allowing anyone access to high-quality LSAT prep. After receiving a 180 perfect score on his LSAT, yes, 180, Alden began building Start LSAT. Start LSAT includes 51 video modules, 400 official LSAT questions, study tips and tricks, and the techniques that took Alden to achieve that 180 perfect score. All for the low price of $110. Yes, that's right, $110. And when using code LITM10, you can get 10% off the Start LSAT self-paced course. But there's more. By using the code LITM100 at checkout, you also get $100 off Alden's upcoming 10-week course for the January LSAT. This 10-week course includes one-on-one tutoring, live classes, the Start LSAT self-paced course with 50-plus modules, weekly classes, access to Law Hub Advantage, and a direct line to the superstar himself, Alden. Alden focuses on building the muscles of your LSAT skills, training them, and making you unstoppable. Check out Start LSAT in the podcast description below at startlsat.com, where you can find offers for the course and one-on-one tutoring. And be sure to use those promo codes LITM100 at checkout for $100 off the 10-week course and LITM10 for 10% off the Start LSAT self-paced course. That is at startlsat.com, one word, startlsat.com, in the description below. Now it's time to talk about one of the sponsors of this podcast, Rhetoric. Rhetoric is a legal tech company that leverages AI to help litigators tailor their arguments to be more persuasive by understanding judges' preferences and tendencies based on their actual filings. A recent study published in Harvard Business Review shows that mirroring a judge's language preferences can increase your odds of success in litigation by 20% or more, and that is exactly what Rhetoric does for you. Back on episode 25, I had the privilege of having Luke Yangling, a good friend of mine and a former guest of the podcast, and from there, Rhetoric thus became a sponsor of the podcast. But now, Rhetoric has some new products to offer. With their brand new product, Cicero, students can replicate the experience of responding to a judge's question in court or the demands of cold calls. This product helps develop and refine verbal communication skills through tailored feedback on the quality of the student's presentation, providing endless practice opportunities. Using Debrief, students can hone their persuasive legal writing using the same tools that major law firms across the United States leverage to perform better than opposing counsel. Students can learn to write with flair and command of writers at the top firms using Debrief's analytics and drafting tools. Not only can Rhetoric upgrade and enhance your writing skills, but can now also help law students excel in the classroom and the courtroom while alleviating the stress of cold calls and performance demands. If you're interested in a demo, let them know you heard it here first, here from Nate. And to support this podcast, check out Rhetoric in the description below at userhetoric.com. One word, userhetoric.com.
Law students, are you feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or short on time in law school? Maybe you just want someone to show you a step-by-step framework to master the topics you're learning in your classes. I know the pressure you're under, and I've got the perfect solution for you. My course, the Law School Operating System, is proven to help you conquer law school with confidence and ease.
Created by Lisa Blasser, a former guest on the podcast and founder of the Law School Success Institute, this course breaks down every subject into manageable main topics that you run through a comprehensive study system to thoroughly prepare you for class and final exams. No more feeling like you need to know everything all at once in the beginning.
But that's not all, Nate. The Law School Operating System also teaches you how to schedule your studying and time effectively. For every topic, you'll know which study step you're on and when you'll complete it every week of your semester. No more mad dash cram sessions, more time with your loved ones. And with my system, you'll walk into your exams knowing you've given 100% of yourself, that there's nothing more you could have done to succeed, and there's no better confidence than that.
Lisa breaks it down like this: one class, one list of main topics, and one system to master each topic. With recorded and live sessions for students available on her website and partnerships with law schools nationwide, the Law School Operating System is here to help you thrive from day one to the final exam. Ready to take control of your law school journey and operate at your full potential in law school? Visit www.lisablasser.com today and enroll in the Law School Operating System. Be sure to use code LSOSNATE10 at checkout for 10% off the recorded course. That is code LSOSNATE10 at checkout. People of the world, Nate Crespo, your host for today and forever. And I apologize in advance. I sound like crap the entire episode. I was recovering from an illness. But nevertheless, this is my conversation with Brian Glass.
Nate, I'm good, man. Thank you for having me. That's a very long way of saying I've worked at 2 firms over the course of my career.
It very much is. And we will talk about all of that, including the fact that you worked at 2 firms across your entire career. But Brian, before we get started, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so thank you. I'm a plaintiff's personal injury lawyer in Fairfax, Virginia. My practice is almost exclusively people that got hurt in auto accidents against insurance companies. And I have a small firm. We have 5 lawyers. We have probably about 18 support staff, 5 of whom are overseas. The other half of our firm is an ERISA long-term disability appeals practice. And so we take great pride in representing the community, and we trade on having the best customer service, client service experience of any professional services firm in Virginia. Because my overarching business principle, Nate, is that nobody is ever going to know what would have happened differently had they hired a different lawyer to handle their case. And there's plenty of good lawyers like me in Northern Virginia. There's too many of them, actually. And most of us are going to guide the result of the case into the same 10 or 20% range in about the same period of time. And so rather than try to differentiate like everybody else does on I'm the best lawyer, I get the best results, I have the most money, right? We try to differentiate on you're going to have the best client service experience. You're never going to have to ask what's going on in your case. You are always going to know what has happened, what is happening right now, and what the next steps are. And so we've utilized technology, automation, VAs, and a great team of staff to make all of that happen. And what we're really proud of having built is a place where actually, if you go and look at most of our Google reviews, most of them talk not about the lawyers and how great the lawyers are, but about how great the team is. So that's what we built, and we're very proud of it.
Now, that's interesting that you have overseas employees. Now, I love doing my research. We won't talk about it now, but I have a feeling, Brian, that you're a very big fan of Tim Ferriss. I don't know why. I think so. I think so because the playbook is very clear that you are a lover of Tim Ferriss and then you disappeared. We're gonna wait.
Yeah, there you go. I tried to move. Do you use the video from this at all?
No, no, no.
Okay, cool. So
Audio only.
the sun glare is not a big deal then. All right,
No,
good.
it's not. And I could go back and edit everything. I'll edit this out. Maybe I'll keep it in. No, I won't. I edit it out. Okay, so back in 2005, you had graduated from James Madison University, and then a year later, you found yourself at William and Mary Law School. Now, Brian. Oh, wait, correct me, please.
Actually, no. A year later, so I graduated in May of 2005, and 3 months later, I found myself at Michigan State University College of Law,
Ah,
where I went for 1 year before transferring to William and Mary. And so the backstory on that, Nate, is I was giving this I actually talked yesterday to a high school class in Northern Virginia. There's this class called Law in Action, and I got invited to speak at Lewis High School, which is in Alexandria, Virginia. And the 9 or 10 kids in the class, and so they asked about like, what's the course? Like, how hard did you work in high school and college to become a lawyer? And my answer was like, I didn't work really hard at all in high school or college, which is kind of how I wound up at Michigan State University. So, so I applied to in 2008. It was like I was, or 2005. I was applying to basically any school that would like take your application for free, right? So, and I got in, let's see if I can remember where I got it. I got into Michigan State, I got into Akron, I got into Ole Miss, and I got into American in DC. And that was it, right? And so when I was approaching law school, I had a full tuition offer and a $10,000 stipend from Akron, and I had a 25% tuition offer from Michigan State. In hindsight, 100% should have gone to Akron and taken the money, right? Knowing what I know now, which is I was going to transfer in a year anyway. So I ended up at Michigan State. And you were talking about Albany and the weather before we got on here. The weather in Michigan State is not for a Virginia boy, right? It's like it snows all the time, it's gray all the time. And on the days when it is not gray and snowy, it's below zero because the cloud cover opens up and everything freezes. Um, and so I spent really my first year of law school like trying to figure out how do I get out of here? How do I transfer? Great school, great place to go to school if you want to practice in Michigan, right? Very fun Big Ten environment, but I wanted to get out and get back to Virginia. So I finally learned how to study my first year of law school, right? I never studied high school or college. I was just blessed with like, if a teacher says it, I can remember it on a test. But I finally figured out how to study. I was top 10 or 5% of my class at Michigan State, and I transferred out and I got into George Mason University and William and Mary as a transfer student. I chose William and Mary because I had too many friends from college that lived in Arlington to go to George Mason. So I wanted to go somewhere that was going to be a quiet place where I could actually work and study, and that was William and Mary. So actually, no, it was not a year later. It was 2 years later that I ended up down at William and Mary.
well, there we go. I love it. Thank you for correcting me. But I have to second all of that. See, thank God they don't invite me back to talk at high schools and they ask me about college admissions because I applied to only one college, the
Mhm.
University at Albany, and that was it. And I probably would have done the same thing with law school going forward in the future. But once again, second on all the studying stuff as well. I never studied in high school. I've barely studied. Well, I'd study a lot in college, but like yourself, I had to learn. I had to teach myself how to study because I had no idea. I studied for one test in my life. It was algebra, 10th grade. I was on the brink of getting a C and I got a B minus. It was great stuff. But you go through law school. So let's talk about the first year of law school at Michigan
Yeah.
State. Some people hate it, some people love it. How was it for you, Brian?
I loved it, man. I loved first year of law school. Um, of course, there's cold calling. I got cold called first in the class on the first day in three of our four classes. It's like a conspiracy of professors to pick on the guy from Virginia. Um, but man, I once I figured out case briefing, it was fun. And I was a sit in the middle, sit towards the back kind of guy. Um, but yeah, I liked first year law school. And the unlock for me, Nate, was the period where you figure out like why are they teaching this case, right? And if you can approach your first year of law school with just figuring out for everything that you're instructed to read, why am I being told to read this? What is the piece of the puzzle that really makes things like building your outline and building your case briefs actually pretty easy, right? When you can figure out, and you said Tim Ferriss, but this is like the meta learning of learning. Like, why am I being assigned this thing? And I was lucky enough to figure that out early on. My routine was on the drive to school, I would listen to a CD. You might not know what a CD is. A CD is this little disc with information on it that you put into your car stereo. And I took out these case brief and outline and bar study CDs from the library, and I would listen to whatever we were going to learn that day on the way into school. So I already had a background for it. I'd already read it. And then by the time we show up in class, it's like, oh, I already kind of know the story of this and I know why it's important. So that was my hack that I think really, really helped me to stay a step ahead of everybody when it came to outlining and when it came to figuring out what's actually going to be on the exam.
I mean, that's wonderful stuff. I love that you talked about the meta learning of learning. I think it's so important. It's super underrated, and it's also really it's hard to think about. You never think about, oh, I of course I know how to learn, I know how to speak. I learned the alphabet when I was younger, but you never really think about, okay, like how do I actually learn things? How do I take something, listen to something, read something, and consume and absorb all that knowledge, be such a sponge about it. I think that's such an important point. And Brian, I'm young, but I'm not that young. I was around when there were CDs. I used to have my Jack Johnson CD. Just stop listening to the Curious George music on my little stereo thing. So I'm well up with the CDs. But going throughout law school, you were a law clerk at Regan, Zambri, and Long. You also, for 2 years during law school, you were a content manager at
Yeah,
Foster Web Marketing.
yeah.
And then eventually you became an associate at Plofchang and Associates. So can you talk about those experiences? And within those experiences, something I love talking about, something very significant on this podcast, is what you do want to do with the law in terms of specialization. I know you said you do plaintiff's personal injury, but
Mhm.
finding out what you don't want to do with the law, especially important. So you can narrow down your options, be able to really figure out, okay, what do I want to do? So can you talk about those experiences and how you sort of found out plaintiff's personal injury is what I want to do?
Yeah, so great research. My 2 summers during law school, I worked at the same firm as Regan, Zambri and Long. It was a high-end plaintiff's injury practice in DC. And my I forget if it was my first summer or my second summer, I got to be on the trial team, which meant like going to trial and watching as as a law student. But on the trial team for this assault case um, where a guy had been at a bar in DC, and the allegations were that the bar knew that there was all this gang activity taking place inside the club, and that they had like closed the bar, shut it down at last call, whatever, 2:30 in the morning. And that when they did that, they forced everybody out through the back of the club, right? You can't come back out the front door. You got to go through the back and they knew that that's where all the gangs hang out. And our client had been assaulted by some kind of Asian street gang, hit over the head with a 2x4, brain damage, brain swelling, brain surgery, and we had all these like medical visuals of what the surgery looked like. It was probably a 5 or 6 day trial in DC Superior Court, and it was fun, man. It's like and every night it was like we go and we would do the day's worth of trial work, and we come back to the office and prep for the next experts, and my job was to put together slides, right? But I remember we had one expert who he'd been paid a whole bunch of money, And in the slide, when you clicked, his name started with an S, but when you clicked, the S turned into a dollar sign, and that was fancy in 2008, 2006, 2007, 2008. So that was a lot of fun. I worked for them both summers. While I was in law school, I worked for Foster Web Marketing, which was an early web marketing and SEO company. So SEO, like all lawyers know that SEO is this magic black box now. But in 2005, 6, 7, it was like cutting edge to have a website that you could go into and edit the content and put up new articles. And that was my job, was for 3 or 4 law firms across the country who were clients of Foster's to go in and write SEO friendly articles that would elevate them to the top page of Google, which is very, very, very hard now, was not all that hard in 2006 and 2007. So the benefit of that was that I got to learn, number one, at the law clerk job, like what is it like to be a trial lawyer? What do trial lawyers do? And then at the content marketing side, I was learning how do you create a website that performs. I was learning all of the business stuff. So those were my jobs here in law school. I graduated in 2008, which was like one of the worst times in recent memory to graduate law school. And all my friends who had gone and gotten $160,000 a year jobs, like those all dried up. And so when I graduated, I got a job like probably 3 weeks before graduation at a general practice firm. And I lasted there about 4 months, right? Because I didn't like billing by the hour. I didn't get any mentorship or teaching. Actually, I was sworn into the bar on a Tuesday, and on Wednesday, I was in court with a client by myself. So that was not a good fit for me. Um, and then, so I lasted about 4 months there. I gave my notice and I discovered plaintiff's personal injury work. I went to work with a guy named Dave Marks. Our clientele at the time was at least half Korean, and our staff was all fluent in Korean. I don't speak a lick of it. Dave knows a couple of expressions, which made for a really, really interesting practice because you don't have a lot of clients calling and saying, I want to speak to my lawyer, right? Because the lawyer didn't even speak the language. So our business really was attracting these cases, sending demands to insurance companies, and then going and trying them. And Virginia had at the time, and still has, but the numbers have changed, kind of this two-tiered court system where you had the general district court was for cases that were worth less than $15,000, and circuit court is a jury trial. It's cases worth 15,000 and more. And we had all of these just rinky-dink $7, $8, $10,000 cases. You just go and try, and if you lose, you lose, right? No big deal. Especially in the face of a $0 or a crappy offer. So I got a lot of early trial experience on cases, auto accident cases where there was not much damage to the car. But all of our clients, maybe I shouldn't say this, but all of our clients kind of knew the script, right? It's like, hey, somebody taps you at a stoplight, scratches in the back of the car, like all of a sudden, 12 weeks of chiropractic care later, you know. So we were, a lot of those cases were, maybe rightly so, either rejected by insurance companies or questioned by insurance companies. And that's why we were going in and trying them. But it gave me, I was probably trying 1 or 2 cases a month in the first couple of years of my career. And that was a lot of fun. And it was completely low risk, right? Because if you lost, you could always appeal and go get your jury trial.
So that was when you were an associate at LeVay and
Yeah, Leva Marks, yeah.
Leva. I knew I was going to
So I,
butcher
so I
it.
worked with Dave for a while. First, it was Leva and Marks, who were a combined criminal and a personal injury practice. And then Dave and I split off, and he was the partner. And then in 17 or 18, elevated me to partner. And then in 19, I left.
So in those early days, doing those very low risk, low stakes trial, how important was it to get those reps in, to flex that muscle, that trial muscle?
Yeah.
How important was it to do that?
Dude, that's the greatest gift that I had in my career is the ability to go and try those early cases. And a boss who said, every time you're in court, if you're scheduling something, if you're arguing a motion, take the time and go watch other people's trials, right? So Fairfax is a popular area. The courthouse is always busy, and we were directly across the street from the courthouse. So I would walk over, file something, and just go sit in the court for an hour, right? And I think The only thing I would change during in the course of my career, if I could go back and do it again, was that I would have spent a year or two at an insurance defense firm just trying three cases a week, right? And I would have gotten the 100 trials that I got in a decade of my career within 2 or 3 years. That's the only thing I would go back and do. So those early reps were so important. And not only your reps, but the ability to go and just have permission to watch somebody else do it. And I get it, like in an hourly practice, that probably doesn't make a lot of sense because you could be billing, you could be in the office, you could be making money. In a contingency fee practice, there's a lot of value to just going and honing the craft somewhere because the things that you can learn from watching other people try cases are going to add dollars to your clients and dollars to your fee when you put them into practice in your own cases.
So clearly, this Mr. David Marks has had a big influence on you. You were with him for a very long, long time, almost 10 years exactly. You were with David Marks, and he clearly, correct me if I'm wrong, is very much seems to be a mentor for you in terms of cultivating your talent, reaching that potential that you had early on in your career. Now, how important has mentorship overall just been for your career in general?
Yeah, it's really important to find people who are a couple of years ahead of you, right? Um, and so, yeah, mentorship is really, really important. That's why I do my podcast. I'm sure it's why you do your podcast, is to talk to the version of yourself that's 3 or 10 years behind you.
Oh, absolutely. That is beautifully said, Brian. I couldn't agree more with you. Always got to go out and find those people that are in the places that you want to be and study them like hell. Figure out what did they do, figure out the things, how you can take their knowledge and transfer it to yourself, put it within your perspective, be like, okay, they did this and this. Let me try to copy it. Let me try to see what we can do. As human beings, we're always mimicking each other. So it is so important to be in the room with those people, always talking to those people, just being a sponge to their knowledge. Now, I saw something, I love doing my research, but I saw something. One of your favorite things, probably your favorite thing to do in the courtroom is to cross-examine liars. Now, why is this your favorite thing? Because I agree. I agree. I did mock trial for a year. I used to
Yeah,
walk up there. I would never bring notes. I'd bring one post-it note and I'd have my points and I'd just be hitting them,
yeah.
hitting them, hitting them, hitting them. So why is it your favorite thing to cross-examine liars?
Well, I think in part because as a plaintiff's lawyer, as a plaintiff's injury lawyer, it's rare that you get to do this, right? The reality is that the vast majority of our cases involve conceded liability crashes where it's just, hey, what is the case worth? And in cases like those, the defendant typically either doesn't testify, or if he testifies, it's like, hey, it was my fault, but it wasn't that bad of a crash, right? And so it's rare that we get to do that. Where it comes up for us is these drunk driving cases. So I made a little bit of a name for myself trying drunk cases against drunk drivers. I had the largest verdict in the state in 2022 in auto accidents against a drunk driver who had driven from a casino 17 miles all the way back to Burke, Virginia. He told us consistently over the course of the discovery in the trial, I had 2 beers. His blood alcohol was a 1.5 or a 1.6 when it was drawn. I had a toxicologist who testified he actually was probably closer to a 2.0 at the time of the crash, which you can't do on 1 or 2 beers, right? And this it was a case where I think had he at all been remorseful or recalcitrant or taken responsibility, I think we wouldn't have had the result that we did. But not only did he stick with this, I had 1 beer, I had 2 beers thing. He tried to blame the roadway. Oh, it was wet. He showed no, in fact, it hadn't rained. His lawyer made this argument in closing arguments because the cop testified that he'd found a fireball bottle in the empty fireball bottle in the driver's door well. And his lawyer made the argument in closing argument that they hadn't secured the scene. And so we don't know where the fireball bottle came from. And I said, I got up on rebuttal. I said, and she also in closing said, we take accept responsibility, we take accountability, blah, blah, blah. I got up, and the first thing I said to the jury was, "Did we watch the same trial?" She's going to tell you they take accountability. She just asked whether there's like a magical fireball fairy flying around the scene, dropping bottles into unsecured vehicles. Like this is not the same trial. And those moments in court are so much fun, but they are so rare because so much of what we do as plaintiffs lawyers is actually defending the legitimacy of our clients' cases, right? The vast majority of the cases that we're litigating because it's either a small crash and we don't understand why the injury is what it is, or the client has a significant history of an injury to the same body part. We don't understand how the crash could have caused that, or the client waited a period of time before they went and got medical care. And it's like, well, okay, if you were really hurt, you would have gone and get medical care. So we spend so much time safeguarding our cases against that, that when you have the opportunity to go on the offensive and then you have a defendant who's lying about what happened and you can prove that they're lying, like those are fun.
Oh yeah, I unfortunately I had my own experience with plaintiff lawyers. I had a plaintiff lawyer helping me out. I got into a little car crash. I actually totaled my entire car. A couple of years ago, my freshman year of college, and it was a very similar situation. The person that it hit was claiming injury. They were saying, they were going, like you said, the 12 weeks of chiropractor. But what had really happened was I hit her, my car was gone. Her car was completely fine, and she just drove off, minutes after the scene. And so eventually, we had to go through all that stuff. But, to get that experience, I was like, wow, like this is the crazy stuff. Like she was really trying to do that. I was getting sued for a lot of money. I was freaking out a little bit, but eventually it settled. We were fine.
Yeah.
But
So, I mean, I'll tell you that experience is not all that uncommon, right? And so, what I would say as a plaintiff's lawyer from that fact pattern that you just described is you were in a car that absorbed a lot of the energy of the crash, right? She was not. And so when you look at a car that doesn't have a lot of damage, so a lot of times that kinetic energy of your car gets transferred straight through to the body. Number two, there's a lot of like, it's just adrenaline after a crash, right? It's kind of like working out. Like you rarely are sore right after you work out, but you're sore 24, 48 hours later. Um, so but that's exactly the position that we end up in as plaintiffs lawyers is you go to trial and somebody says, well, there's all the damage is over here, not much damage there. And plus she was walking around the scene and she drove off. And so that's exactly what I mean when I say we end up defending our clients' legitimacy and honesty of the injury a lot of the time. But I completely understand that experience having been through what you went through and seeing what you saw.
Oh yeah, it was crazy stuff, but we got through it. I had to do a little deposition as well. It was like, wow, this. But they said I had the quickest deposition ever that plaintiff lawyer ever got. So I was like, oh wow, very proud of myself. But moving on from that, in 2019, you hung your own shingle and you became a partner at Ben Glass
Yeah.
Law. Now, something I love talking about when people start their own firms is that when they begin, it's a bit of a struggle. It's a lot
Mhm.
going on. It's a brand new business and you got to get it off the ground. So, can you talk about first starting out, hanging your own shingle, how
Yeah.
that was, and what struggles that may have ensued if they were any?
So to be clear, I didn't do that. So in 2019, I joined my dad's practice. It's a 20 at the time was a 25 or 28-year established practice. And what happened, the reason that I did that is um, really three things. Space. So Dave and I decided not to expand our office into the space next door. My dad was moving into a office that had more space. We had an employee quit, and then the third thing was my wife had our third baby boy, and she spent 2 days in ICU, a very very challenging birth. He was 10 days in the NICU, and I kind of looked at that confluence of things. I said, okay, we didn't take more space, right? We've lost some cost over here in terms of the employee. And my dad at the time was 60. Um, and I was like, if I don't leave now, then there might not be an opportunity to ever work with him. So all those things came together. So I'm going to go and take my practice, go work with him. That happened in July of 18. I kind of mentally made that decision. I tried my last case, Dave's firm, in January of 19. And then 4 days later, I was working with my dad. So it was absolutely not a new practice. I walked into an existing auto accident practice. It was doing about $500,000 in revenue a year. We'll do a little over two this year. So I've grown it from where it was, but I can't speak to having hung a shingle and, trying to figure out where the first dollar is coming from.
No, no, absolutely, absolutely. Now, working with your father, that's very interesting. I work with my father, process server. I am a process server. So he owns a process serving company. All all three of us, me and my two brothers, we all work for him. So I understand to an extent the family business. But how is it coming in and working with your father on a daily basis, doing lawyerly stuff with him? I mean, how is that? That must be amazing.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So he runs our long-term disability appeals practice. I run our auto accident practice. And and I think that has been one of the keys to the success is that we're in different verticals. We don't really get in each other's way. If he has something he can't figure out, he asks me in the same way, right? So we're really good at bouncing ideas off of each other, turning one plus one into three and not aggravating each other. But it truly is a family business. So my mom has kept the books here for 25 years. My wife came over to work for us 2 years ago to run our HR in our growing firm. But I think the keys for working in a family business are alignment on vision of what you want the firm to be and sticking in your lane, right? And not coming over and poking the other person too often.
So you spoke about how within your firm, you make sure that client services and customer service is of the highest quality, and you're using technology, using automation. You're also using people overseas, which is an interesting point, which I'd like to ask about.
Yeah,
So, this tech forwardness
yeah,
towards building this firm, what does it sort of look like? What sort of automation do you have? What
yeah.
sort of tech are you using? And the overseas point, did you get it from Tim Ferriss? That's my question. That's it.
No, I got it from Brett Tremblay at Get Staffed Up, actually. Uh, he was our first overseas VA provider. Um, so technology. Number one, we have a client case management software. We have a separate lead management software, and we built automations into both of them. So on the lead side, if you call, the tracking number is always tied into whatever marketing campaign. So I know where you saw me, right? Because everybody goes, "Oh, I saw you on Google," which is meaningless from a investing in marketing perspective. And so you have to have those automations tied in through there. We have a really built out follow-up system. So one of the things that happens in small firms is you can't always answer the phone the first time, right? It's just a reality. Somebody calls at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday, they're probably hitting the answering service. And it's difficult to get them back on the phone. So we've got automations built in terms of task reminders for our intake team to follow up, but also automated text messages and emails that go out to them. When somebody has become a client, we've built out systems and processes inside the case management software for things that should happen in every single case. So every case is unique, but they all kind of rhyme, right? And so the same actions need to happen in the firm. All of that is built out in our case plan. And for the client's perspective, two things happen. Number one, my team has a task every 30 days to call the client and check in, right? We expect the client to remember us and to say, if they have seen a new doctor or something has come up medically to report that back to us, but it doesn't always happen. So my team is always going to check in with them at least every 30 days to get that information. And then we utilize a company called Hona, Hona, to push notifications about your case out to you. So if you were one of my clients and you finished medical care and we were working on writing the demand in your case, move your case in the case management software from treating to demand, and you would get a notification, hey, congratulations, you're done treating. The team has begun doing this, this, and this, right? The next steps are this, and this. Here's what you should expect. Here's how long you should expect it to take. And by the way, in case you've forgotten, here's the paralegal, the assistant, and the lawyer who are working on your case, and here's their contact information. Right? So all of that is part of great customer service. We've gone through these iterations of overseas staff, and there are things that either they are good at or not good at, or I am good at training and not good at training. we have struggled to find overseas staff who can do intake and sales very well. And so we recently brought that position back in-house because if I have a good case that calls, I want my intake person to be able to run screaming down the hallway. There's a great case on the phone, like somebody get on with them. And I've never been able to produce that from the people who were working in Honduras or Colombia for us. They just don't have that same sense of urgency. Um, so right now we utilize overseas help in the Philippines for three things. We do medical collection, medical records collection through there. We do our social media production through a VA, separate VA in the Philippines. And then my dad and I each have our own executive assistant in the Philippines who manages all of our travel, our email, our schedule, our calendaring, all that stuff.
Oh, I love to hear that. I really, really do because it's a very new thing that is just sort of now coming into prominence, getting those executive assistants, getting people overseas who can help you because it is very low cost, which may seem like a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing for them
Yeah,
because, US dollars into whatever their currency is actually a lot
yeah,
more valuable than people think. But one of the things, one of my favorite people ever, Andrew Wilkinson, he's a huge, VC entrepreneur guy, but he is a huge investor in somewhere.com, and that's exactly what they do. So that's my sort of recommendation. Not that I have a plethora of those, but that's one of my favorite things is they have all these lists. Like you get full stack developers on there. Like it's crazy. It's a really, really crazy space. And I recommend everyone to look into it because it's clearly working for you. It is so, so effective. It just makes life so much easier.
the mental hurdle to get over is that you are paying relatively little to somebody, and it feels like I still have a little bit of guilt if I'm going to spend, so in the Philippines, monthly living wage is about $450, right? That's the monthly cost of living. Well, I might spend that on a flight, right? And so I feel guilty being like, hey, can you look up this flight for this fun thing that I want to go do and book it for me, right? But the reality is that these jobs, the VA jobs, are so good that the local economy is having a hard time staffing teachers and nurses, right? Because the highly educated people, and they all speak great English, unaccented English sometimes, they all want to be American employed virtual assistants. And they work synchronous to us. So they work 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, which is the middle of the night. But my EA tells me that probably 10% of the economy is people like him, right? And there's this whole subculture of people that sleep during the day and work at night.
Oh yeah, and it is just growing and growing, and there's so many different places that you can now go and get these virtual assistants all across the globe. It is a crazy industry, and it's constantly, constantly growing by the day, especially with the new software, new automation, all the AI stuff. I mean, it is, I feel like it's going to explode soon. But in 2022, you started the Life Beyond Briefs podcast. You are the host of it, and you talk about avoiding living life on autopilot, exiting the bill more hours sort of mindset, and you talk very much about life design, and that's what sort of tipped me off of this guy might like Tim Ferriss. But can you talk about why you started the podcast in the first place and what you talk about on the podcast itself?
Yeah. Podcast is a selfish thing. Um, so why I started it? I started it in part to be a vehicle to talk to and share knowledge with people who are 3 to 10 years behind me. In part to attract attention for Great Legal Marketing, which is our coaching and consulting business for owners of solo and small law firms. But in part to give myself permission to interview friends of mine and people who are smarter than me and give them a platform and ask them questions that otherwise I would have to say, hey, can I pick your brain about something? I hate that expression. But if you run a podcast, you can ask smart people these questions. You don't have to pay their hourly consulting rates, and you can produce collateral that's helpful to them and to their audience, right? So one of the things that we do for every episode is I have my EA create Canva graphics with pull quotes and create social media posts, and we give the whole portfolio to the guests so that they can share it also. So again, selfishly, attracts more attention to my show, but celebritizes the person who's taken the time out of their day to be on your show. and gives them something of value to share with their audience.
Obviously, I have to agree. Because I myself are sitting here on this podcast, and that's the sort of playbook I look to play every
Yeah.
single time. Because it just helps everyone. There is no negative coming out of doing a podcast with anyone or celebritizing anyone because you're helping them reach out to more people. You're also helping yourself because those people that they may know, they now know you. And it's just like, the whole web gets crazy and crazy. But at the end of the day, everything comes back to you. Everything comes back to that guest. And that's the beauty of podcasting in itself. I love it so much. But let's talk about, because the following year, after you started the podcast, you became the president of Great Legal Marketing. You have a Great Legal Marketing Summit coming up October 3rd to 5th, correct? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
it just happened, but yeah.
Oh, it just happened. I see. I'm losing my mind over here. But it was in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona. I love Arizona. One of my favorite places on earth. I think heaven on earth is Sedona, Arizona.
Yeah.
That is actually one of probably the favorite place I've ever been to in my life. Every day I was there, I was like, wow, if you're living here, I don't know how you could be unhappy. I couldn't understand it. I walk outside, there's red rocks everywhere. I'm like, wow, this is paradise. But you had it in Phoenix, Arizona this year. Last year, you had it in Orlando, Florida, which I went to very long ago when I was like 3 years old, so I don't remember it. So maybe I should go back, check it out, see if it's still beautiful. I think it is. Well, maybe not now. It's tough times down there in Florida. But why did you decide to become the president of Great Legal Marketing? And what is Great Legal Marketing?
Yeah, so we are a coaching and consulting business for owners of solo and small law firms. And the marketing part is kind of deceptive, right? People come to us um, because you want to get more clients, make more money, work fewer hours, right? That's why everybody goes to any kind of consultant, right? More clients, more money, fewer hours, less work. Um, Really, what we are selling is the ability to design the kind of firm that you actually want to run. And that's different for everybody, right? Here we run an event called the Great Legal Marketing Summit. Actually, we thought about not doing it in 2025. But the feedback from 2024 was such that I think we are going to do it again. And we bring together some of the best vendors in the business, all vetted by us as good, honest firms that we know have worked with other law firms in the industry, many of whom are our members. And really, what we think we built, Nate, is a community of lawyers that want to come together and help each other out, right? So you can go to a conference just about every week. In the law firm space, you certainly have your choice of where you want to go. What you won't find at ours is like a big name keynote speaker, huge after party, and a popular band from 15 years ago. But what you will find is a community of lawyers that want to help you build a better law firm and help you figure out the next trick or tactic that will put you on a trajectory to get you where you want to go 3 years faster.
So, Brian, from looking over and doing my research, I found that you do not pull any punches, and I love that very much. I don't think you should. But you love talking about goal setting advice as you do
Yeah.
in your consulting
Yeah.
company. Having that future vision 1 year down the line and even 10 years down the line, it's so important to have that vision. So can you talk about why it's important to have that long-term vision? I know why, but can you tell me why? Because I have some commentary on it, but I'll let you go first.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of a 3-year vision, right? So Cameron Herold's Vivid Vision is the book that I use most often to figure out where I'm going. I think 1 year probably is too short for you to make any major changes, and 10 years is too long because things are going to happen in your life that you don't have any control over and you need to navigate around. Um, but having the design, not so much of what goals do I want to achieve within 3 years, but how do I want to feel? Right. And so what I tell people is, and I did this at our summit, like list all the things that you would do if you had $10 million. Okay. Like circle the most important three and itemize all the reasons that that would make you happy. Okay. And we'll come back to that in a second. And now itemize the three things that are keeping you from doing those things right now. Yeah. Because two things are true. Number one, we don't have to solve for you having $10 million. Dollars. They just need to solve for you being able to do the things you would do if you had to. And you probably could do a lot of those things now. And those things you couldn't do now, Like all you have to do is solve for the constraints in your life that prevent you from doing those things. You don't actually have to get the 10 million, which may be 10 million away from where you are right now. And so I think many of us lawyers get hung up in, I have to build a seven-figure law firm. I have to build an eight-figure law firm. I have to have three lawyers under me. It's like, no, you don't have to do either of those things. Like you need to make the list of all the things you like doing and you're great at doing in your practice and figure out how to run a firm that allows you to have somebody else that does everything else, right? And so having that list first and then solving for the problem of how do I hire for somebody to do the shit that I don't want to do, really is the key to running a practice that's sustainable and won't burn you out and lets you get home to your family on time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because you always got to play to your strengths. Because sometimes, we have our weaknesses, whatever they may be, and we might want to work on them. But on the flip side of it, many times they are weaknesses, so they're probably not going to get any better. So
Mhm.
it's more value to you. You get more ROI per se if you were to go on those strengths, really hone in on those strengths, and be able to sort of outsource those weaknesses that you may have. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean that's Gary Vaynerchuk stuff, right? It's like stop trying to turn the stuff that you're C plus at into B plus. Like focus on the stuff that you are A or A minus at, elevate that a little bit, and then hire somebody who's A or A minus at the things that you are C plus at. Yeah, 100% agree.
You caught me on that. I definitely got that from Gary Vee. I'll tell you what, I definitely did. Those YouTube shorts are paying off finally.
I feel
But
like our Spotify playlist looks very similar.
listen, it definitely does. And we'll talk about the podcast, all of the podcasts that you listen to soon enough. But the last thing I want to ask you here is that you spoke about the average of the five people that you
Yeah,
spend the most time with is the result of who you are. As I like to say, which I probably stole from someone else, is
yeah.
that you are the result or the equal of the people you are with, the people you're around, and the things that you do. And that is what totals out to your life and your happiness and everything like that. So, why do you say that the average of five people you spend the most time with is the most valuable thing you can do? You don't want to hang around losers. Those were your words, not mine.
I said this to the high school class yesterday, actually. He asked one of the admins who was sitting in the class asked, "Hey, do you have any advice for people who might be the first ones in their family to go to college for how you then navigate the law school?" I said, I don't have any firsthand experience with that, right? I'm very fortunate to have been born into the family, into the country that I was born into. I don't have any of that experience, but I'll tell you what I think I would do if I woke up tomorrow as a 16-year-old who nobody in my family had gone to college. Um, I would go to a courthouse and I would just sit and watch because the doors were always open. Sit and watch and introduce myself to two people a day and try to find somebody like me who's now successful, right? And try to reverse engineer that. What I said to him is you are the average of the five people that you spend the most time with. And if you look around at your circle and they're all losers, you are going to be a loser, right? So, so you have to figure out who's ahead of me a little bit in the areas that I want to improve in, whether it's academics or finances or relationship with your spouse, right? So I think that's critically important is either developing that network yourself or intentionally putting yourself into that situation or paying for masterminds and affinity groups that get you into rooms with people that are doing bigger and better things.
Well, it stands true. You certainly do not pull any punches, which I love so much. I wouldn't want to hang out with losers. I don't want to be a loser. Of course not. But it just goes to say how important it is to monitor and be aware of the people around you, what they're doing. If they're not doing great things, they're probably not people you want to be around. If they're not doing things that you don't want to do, if they're not on the path that you want to be, if you want to be very successful and those people may not be on the path of success, then it may be time to move on. It's a hard truth, but you know what? Hard truths are important because the truth will set you free. But Brian, we're now down to our last five questions. The first of the five questions is something we talked about previously. Within tech, automation, software, there's all these new technologies, especially in AI. They're flying out everywhere. New companies made every day, probably.
Mhm.
But this is the tech stack question per se. So, Brian, what does your tech stack look like? Either personally, just with your business, what does it look like?
What does my tech stack look like? So in the business, we use Lead Docket for leads. We use CasePeer for client service management. We use Hona for client communications. I utilize Notion as a knowledge and a task-based software with my EA. What else is in? I'm sure I have other things. What else do people usually tell you about that I've left out?
I mean, people love using ChatGPT. I don't know if you're a fan of it yourself.
Yep, ChatGPT. So actually, my EA is like he's a AI wizard, and he knows which one to use for which tone or which goal we're trying to achieve. I'm primarily ChatGPT. The other one that we've been using lately that's really helpful for cutting up video and creating shorts is Opus Pro.
Yes.
Yeah.
I use Opus Pro myself. I'm a big ChatGPT guy. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
And then the AI hack that I've learned is I no longer buy the annual subscription to anything because something better is coming out in 3 months.
Exactly. But see, you know it well. I know that very well because I've been using ChatGPT since my freshman year of college. So it's been years and years of using
Wow.
it. And I know it was crazy because at first, like obviously they were making minimal improvements because they didn't have that many users. But I think by last year or 2 years ago, it just was going and going and going and going, and it kept changing every single time. And it was like it wasn't even worth getting ChatGPT Plus because then I would find out there's this new AI chat model, all these different models. I use Perplexity as well. I love that one. But now, just like your AI, just like your EA, I as well use different models or LLMs for different tasks. So for Perplexity, it's good for large swaths of information, organizing information, doing research. Where ChatGPT is very good for idea creating, not so much Perplexity, but they source everything. Perplexity's crazy, honestly. ChatGPT doesn't have the sources as much, like if you were doing research, but they'll give you links and everything. It's crazy. So I'm all in with all the ChatGPT stuff because it really helps me just create ideas, get organized with all my notes and such.
If you want to scare yourself,
Oh,
ask
please.
ask ChatGPT, since you've been using it for 3.5 years. Of all the things that I've asked you, tell me something that you think I don't know about myself.
I'm gonna do it. That's great. Oh my goodness. I'm excited now because I want to know what ChatGPT if it's talking crap or not. If it's talking trash to me, we became very good friends, me and ChatGPT over time, but this friendship may be ending soon. But fourth to last question here, Brian, live on the Lawyers in the Making podcast. What are your book recommendations for people? Doesn't have to be about the law, just some of your favorite books you've ever read in your entire life, something you give a gift to someone.
Hmm. So I'll give you two. Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold, fantastic book. Um, and then I'm gonna screw up his name, but the book is Sapiens,
Oh,
Yoval Harris, I think.
yes.
Um, and he's got a new book called Nexus, which is about the history of human knowledge from the dawn of time up through AI. Really, really interesting, meta learning information kind of stuff. Just has nothing to do with the law. Just I think all of that human. I was also a philosophy major. That philosophy sociology blend is really interesting.
Oh yeah, I love Sapiens very much. Sapiens is in my crate back there, but I read it really long time. I read it my senior year of high school because senior year of high school I was very bored. I needed things to do, so I decided to read Sapiens, and it just blew my mind because it just makes you think about the world in a different way. It makes you view the world in a different way, sort of gives you like new lenses to look at the world, a new perspective. Like, oh my gosh, like I know that he has a full chapter about like money and how like people used to just trade things with each other. So, I give you a rug and you give me like a bunch of stones, but now we have currency and now it's backed by the government. And it's a crazy read and it just makes you think about things in a totally different light. So I love that recommendation very much. But third to last question here, Brian, what are the types of things you consume, not food, consume on a daily basis? Either that be through social media, so Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Substack, uh, Reddit, Facebook. People still use Facebook.
Yeah.
Facebook. Any podcasts that you listen to that you recommend to people? Any Substacks you read? Any newsletters? What is crossing the transom of Brian's mind on a daily basis?
So I do LinkedIn. I watch CNBC. I don't consume any other national news. And then I'll give you my podcast list is All In. I like My First Million and the spin-off MoneyWise. And I'm a big fan also of Ramit Sethi's podcast, which used to be called I Will Teach You to Be Rich and is now called Money for Couples.
We do have a very similar Spotify playlist, I'll tell you that. I am a huge fan of the All-In Pod. I'm assuming that you got, maybe didn't, maybe did, but that summit idea, you may have got it from the All-In people.
We've been
I,
running it for 20 years.
oh, there you go. So that's a huge influence on me. I love the All In podcast. I've been listening for a very, very long time. My First Million, of course. I was listening to My First Million this morning. So they are a spectacular podcast. And Money Wise, the spinoff with Sam Parr. I mean, it's all just fantastic stuff. I love My First Million. It is one of my favorite podcasts ever because they keep it fun. That's what I think I like about it. It's not dry, even though I do enjoy the dry podcast. I know like Lex Friedman, sometimes it gets a little dry. They're just yapping on and on about, but it is straight to the point expertise. Where My First Million, you could sort of get a very fun, it's light, it's very nice. I loved when they talked to the overtime guy. I thought that guy was absolutely brilliant and amazing. I mean, he made overtime at 50 years old. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I didn't even know it. So great recommendations. I love it very much. But second to the last question here, Brian, what does an ideal Friday night and Sunday morning look for Brian?
I'll tell you what I'm doing today. I'm leaving the office at 3:30 and going to do happy hour with my wife before we pick up the kids, or before we go home to the kids. Lately, ideal Friday night in the fall is like we do maybe a little happy hour, come home, have dinner at home, bring the TV onto the back porch, get a fire pit going, and have family movie night. So my Sunday mornings now are occupied with travel soccer. I coach an 11-year-old boys travel team, so we're out somewhere on Sunday morning.
Oh yeah, I love to hear the travel soccer. I had my playoff intramural game yesterday. Unfortunately, we lost, but that's okay. It's all right. We got a new season next
Yeah.
semester. We'll be ready to go, me and my team. But I love to hear the coaching, the travel soccer. Soccer. I hope to be coaching travel soccer one day. I won't be that crazy, but I will try to emulate Pep Guardiola as much as I possibly can. Now, finally, Brian, last question. I did that at the end of every single episode, but Brian, what are your words of wisdom for the aspiring law students, the current law students, and the legal professionals out there in the world?
Oh man. Oh, aspiring. So I break it down in two ways. Like aspiring law students, the smartest thing I can tell you is go to the law school where you will graduate with the least amount of debt, right? I heard you say top 14 school. If it's me, I would go to a top 100 school that I could go to for free. Legal professionals, I think, you have to. So many of us get caught up in the doing, more, without thinking really deeply about why. Why are you doing any of this, right? And if you ask most lawyers, what are the things that you would do if you had infinite money? They would say, more travel, more time with family, fewer cases. And then you look at what they're doing, and none of it is more travel, more time with family, fewer cases. And most of us could do those three things. There's nothing preventing you from doing those three things, except that really what you're chasing is more cases, more time working, less time with family. Um, and so I think every once in a while, like resetting to what is it that I'm actually trying to achieve and having a group of people that you can share that with, and then share what you think your 1 year or your 90-day goals are and have them tell you that either is or is not in alignment with the thing that you are trying to achieve. Because for most of us, it's not in alignment. So that's it. It's like you have to have an overarching theme that you're shooting for. And then you have to step back and say, are the activities that I'm engaging in on a week-to-week, day-to-day basis getting me any closer to the thing that I say that I want? Because a lot of times it's not.
Brian, beautifully said. Like you said, got to be consistent, got to keep it going. Because if you do one thing, a little thing every single day, you're doing something every single week, you do it every single month, you do it every single year, and it spans across years, and now you get that more travel, less cases, less work. It's beautifully said, Brian. But that is the podcast. So everyone be sure to check out all of Brian's stuff below in the description, his podcast, his website. And for everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check us out, lawyersinthemaking.substack.com, lawyersinthemaking, one word, substack.com, and I will see you all in the next one.